Chê cái gì? Chỗ ghê bà hiểu vậy. Ai số chỗ ghê bà cái bì kiểu vậy. Ai.
I eventually realized that the Pirahã are happy already. They don't believe in hell. They don't believe in heaven. So taking the message of God to the Pirahã is like taking ice to the Eskimos.
Các bác quên đi xe cái bị ôi. Ai ca biểu vậy. Ai các bác quên đi xe ai bữa đi.
In 25 years of missionary work, Daniel Everett failed to attract a single Pirahã convert.
The questioning of my own faith began as I saw how happy the Pirahã were, as I tried to answer their very probing and direct questions about the nature of the evidence that I had for what I believed. And as I reflected on all of these things, it eventually led to the abandonment of my own faith.
This dramatic change triggered the breakup of Everett's family.
It was a traumatic experience to have a relationship of over 30 years come to an end like that. I mean, we got married when we were 18, but much more difficult to me was the fact that my children didn't speak to me for 2 years. And even today, they struggle with some things based on how radically I've diverged from the father that they thought I was in terms of my beliefs.
Abaya cũng nhiều abaya pisai. Abaya cũng piao pikwi piang.
Abandoning missionary life, Everett began to focus on his academic career. He had long suspected something was fundamentally different about Pirahã grammar. And if his hunch was right, it could transform our understanding of human language.
At the time that I was going through the spiritual crisis and the family crisis and the marriage crisis, I was also going through an intellectual crisis. And I had to say something about this at the same time that I tried to explain a number of the unique characteristics of the Pirahã language. I had no idea when I started writing this paper that it was going to be controversial to the degree that it was.
Daniel Everett had just picked a fight with the father of modern linguistics, Noam Chomsky.
Noam is not only the most influential linguist in this sense of the past century, but I think it's probably the case that he's the most influential linguist of all time.
I finished the paper, I sent it off to the #1 journal of anthropology, and then all hell broke loose.
I think he knows he's wrong. That's what I really think.
It might be an interesting question of, say, social anthropology, but can't have anything to do with the nature of language. It just doesn't make any sense.
I had people sending me hate mail, accusing me of racist views.
And I think it's a move that many, many intellectuals make to get a little bit of attention.
I was appalled when I read that Chomsky had said that Dan was a charlatan. I know both these people, and that is not right. That is unacceptable.
The reason there was so much fuss is really not very scientific. I mean, it was, here's this guy coming out of the jungle with this language that only he knows, and he's saying that the greatest linguist in history is dead wrong about his most important idea.
I mean, there's also questions about whether any of it's true, but that's another story.
The bitter war of words is in reaction to the grammatical anomaly Dan Everett claims to have found. According to Everett, Pirahã shows no evidence for recursion, the ability to combine an endless number of ideas in a single sentence.
So let's say that we have the simple sentence like, Bill saw Mary. And now we want to make that part of a larger sentence. John said that Bill saw Mary. But for this to be recursion, we have to be able to keep going. So we might want to say something like, John said, that Bill said, that Mary said, that Peter said, that Irving bought a house. And that is true recursion, the ability for a sentence to just keep going on forever. If in a language you can show there is a largest sentence and you can't make it any larger, that language doesn't have recursion. And Pirahã is such a language.
In 2002, Noam Chomsky proposed that recursion is the basis of all human language, a key component of his theory of universal grammar, the most influential idea in linguistics. Universal grammar argues the structure of language, the grammar, is innately found in the human genome, something we are born with rather than learn. According to the theory, all human languages, regardless of their surface differences, share a common deep structure, a universal grammar. It's a powerful idea, and it's dominated linguistics for more than 50 years.
In the modern sense, universal grammar is just the theory of the genetic component of the language faculty. That it exists is hard to deny.
If Everett is right about Pirahã, then many believe the case for universal grammar is severely undermined.
Chomsky, who kind of has an outsized influence in linguistics, whatever his latest pronouncement is, everyone takes very seriously. In a recent paper, Chomsky argued that the narrow language faculty, the part of language that's specific to language, consists only of an ability to do recursion. Not every linguist, to put it mildly, accepts that. I don't. But it was out there as the latest statement from Mount Olympus on what's special about language. And so the claim that there's a language that was missing exactly that thing that Chomsky said is essential obviously made it much more interesting to people.
If I'm right and Pirahã does lack recursion, then recursion can't be the universal basis for human language. So one of us is right and one of us is wrong.
It's now been 2 years since Everett's last visit to the Amazon. At MIT's Brain and Cognitive Sciences lab, a new expedition is preparing to go and test his claims. Leading the team is Professor Ted Gibson.
I think Dan's most controversial claim is the claim that human language doesn't have to be recursive. It might be right and it might be wrong, and I just don't know the answer. I think that's a very interesting, open controversy. How many rules?
Along with colleague Dr. Steve Piantadosi, Gibson has developed a new computer program for analyzing human language. He's designed it specifically to test Everett's recursion claim. But first, he needs Pirahã recordings.
What Ted and I are doing is trying to make the debate scientific. And so I think that that's really the only way to resolve these kinds of questions. You can't just go back and forth bickering, all the time. You have to have some kind of scientific method and some kind of quantifiable evidence if you want to answer these things.
One of the most interesting properties of this language and culture is that they're uninterested in the outside world, so we get a look at human cognition without the influence of other cultures, just sort of one culture.
This expedition will be the largest and perhaps most rigorous to test Daniel Everett's ideas. In the eyes of many, its results may well settle this debate. Everett will accompany the team as translator. But taking on the world's leading linguist is more than an academic argument. It strikes at the heart of where human language stems from.
What makes us human? That's what this debate is all about. Where does our language come from? Is our language some mysterious gene that somehow crept into our evolution? If so, that's worth knowing. That's very interesting. What I'm claiming is that culture can affect not just the words of a language, but the entire grammar of a language. And I'm saying that the Pirahã are one clear example of this happening.
Perhaps the most radical claim of Dan Everett is that unusual features of Pirahã grammar are a consequence of features of their culture. Because there's one generalization that I think almost all linguists would agree with, which is that the variation among languages doesn't have a whole lot to do with variations across the cultures of the people who speak the languages. So just to be concrete, some languages put the verb in the middle and have the object after. John ate the sushi. Some have the verb at the end. John the sushi ate. But do any of these features correlate with some kinds of culture, with more uptight cultures or expressive cultures or intimate cultures or technological cultures? The answer is generally they don't.
For Everett, the detail of how Pirahã culture affects grammar lies in their fixation with the present. This preoccupation, he claims, produces a grammar with only a present tense. A grammar without recursion. A grammar of happiness.
Igehe lai bai kwe ai igehe ama ayo hiba we kwe kapogo
ya so igo so siba what koga kaba ha koga ok siba we ko pawi học biết coi sẽ có cái
Yang wa he ba ubi ya ba ha. Ai chi he ba ubi ya me ai chi ao pi kwe.
On the eve of his departure, Everett gets a call from Brazil's National Indian Foundation, known as FUNAI.
Oi, Pedro, tudo bem? Yeah, I think that it's going to be, well, I don't think, I know it's going to be extremely disappointing to Ted and his team. I don't know how I'm going to deal with it. Well, I was just told that, after all this planning and all this effort and having gone down, that Valmir, the local FUNAI supervisor, has said that we can't go back to the village. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think that the only thing I can do is fly all the way down there to Brazil, go talk to Valmir and say, what can we do to make this happen?
With one stamp, Valmir Parinchin can grant Everett access to the Pirahã. He is the regional coordinator of FUNAI, the agency responsible for Brazil's indigenous tribes.
Eu fui dos quando assumi, eu proibi, a entrada de todos os tipos de missionários em suas terras, na terra indígena Pirahã. O Daniel tem os Pirahã gostam dele, a gente percebe que os Pirahã gostam, mas hoje nós temos a preocupação da ameaças diretamente da cultura Pirahã, a questão dos missionários,
The fact Everett is now a professor of linguistics doesn't appear to count for much. His old occupation continues to haunt him.
So now I'm on my way to Humaitá, Amazonas, to meet with Valmir Parinchin. Valmir is the one with the power to say whether I can or can't go back to the village right now. If Valmir says no, there's a good chance that that will be no for good. It may be the last chance I ever have to go to the Pirahã.
Everett suspects his religious past is not the sole reason for his rejection. The real cause, he believes, is his collision with the linguistics establishment.
As a result of my work, I've become quite controversial among linguists. A couple of years ago, a couple of U.S. linguists wrote a letter to the National Indian Foundation accusing me of conducting racist research.